Cody, are you off doing that YouTube again?
Yes, Mother.
You do remember what I told you the last time.
Yes, Mother.
All these people act like they're your friends, like they care about you. But I'm the one who cares.
Yes, Mother.
You think this is all fun and games. You think this is one big joke. It appears Mother must teach you once again.
Yes, Mother. So Psycho 2 tells the story of Norman Bates 2 decades after the original murders, being released from a psychiatric hospital to go back to his regular life and try and rebuild. All the while, Mother tries to fit her way back in. Or does she? Well, we're here, people, the first sequel to the original Alfred Hitchcock classic Psycho. Thank you to everybody, first of all, before I even get into this, for all of the hype and excitement that you guys have had for this second review. It has been a while, probably since I did the Halloween series, that I've had so many messages and comments and everything else asking me, where the hell is that Psycho 2 review? I can't wait for it. So thank you guys for all the excitement. It makes me more excited to get into these reviews, the fact that you guys are that excited to see them. So looking forward to talking about Psycho 2, and keep your eyes peeled, because those of you that have been missing me, Brian, CP, and hopefully Lindsay, you'll be seeing something from all of us very soon, so keep your eyes peeled on that one. So Psycho 2 was made almost 23 years after the original movie, and the movie's storyline actually keeps in tandem with that time difference. It was right in the middle of when slashers were starting to get big. We just had Friday the 13th 3 years prior. Freddy hadn't even come onto the scene yet. This was right thick into like the birth of what became known as the 80s slasher craze. Psycho 2 had been turned into a book by the author of the original book, and Hollywood looked at it, decided they wanted to go a different direction to appeal more to this 80s slasher genre. They wanted to do a sequel to the original film. You had a script by Tom Holland, not Spider-Man, by the way. I get that question all the time. Tom Holland, the creator of Child's Play, the creator of Fright Night. This is a guy that, he's kind of an unsung hero in horror to a certain degree, because he's got so many awesome properties out there that he brought to life and he kind of made what we know it to be. But he's not mentioned alongside Wes Craven or John Carpenter or even Cronenberg or Hooper. Like, this guy is just totally an unsung hero in the horror history as far as I'm concerned. So he wrote the script for Psycho 2. You had Dean Cundey working all of the cinematography and the photography in this. This is the guy who did the original Halloween, so a lot of horror fanatics will recognize that name, and he was certainly a big name at the time. And you had this storyline set up to where, how do you follow the classic, original, but very simple storyline of Psycho? In this, they decided to make it a character study on Norman Bates himself. So 2 decades later, the guy's released from a psychiatric hospital. He's released back to the hotel, back to his home to fully heal, to rebuild himself, to insert himself back into society. And things start to get in the way of that. Now, this is a sequel that a lot of people have not seen yet. Everybody knows Psycho. If you haven't even watched it, you know the basic gist of it and you know the twist. So I'm gonna say this. Psycho 2 is a fantastic sequel. I will get that out of the way now. And if you have not seen it, I encourage you to turn this review off, go and check Psycho 2 out, and then come back. Because while I'm not normally that worried about talking spoilers for a movie that's 30-something years old, this one I want you guys to enjoy on its own, because there's a lot of twists and turns, there's a lot of misdirection, and I don't want you to walk into it knowing all the surprises that it has in store for you if you're not already familiar with it. So there's your warning for everybody else that has seen Psycho 2. Let's get going. And kicking off my positives for Psycho 2 is the storyline and the script by Tom Holland, because very few times in history, especially in horror history, have you seen like a classic original movie like Psycho get a sequel that damn near competes with that original film and totally merits its existence aside from just capitalizing on the name for a quick, easy buck. Psycho 2 really earns its place within this franchise and earns its respect alongside that original film. It doesn't rehash things. It doesn't try to like just full-on gore fest the same thing that we saw in the first movie. It doesn't just try to capitalize on the name and be lazy about the story. They really put effort into this movie to making it a completely different animal while holding on to a lot of the aesthetics and a lot of the themes that made that original Psycho famous. So in this, it's much more of an introspective kind of analyzation of who Norman Bates is as a character. Because although he was the main focus of the first movie as far as its legacy goes, he wasn't necessarily in the forefront the entire time in that film. And especially since the twist itself with him and Mother being one personality that's sharing a body, not being revealed until the final reel of the film, you never really got to explore that character until you got to Psycho 2. In this, you get Norman Bates and you get Anthony Perkins' performance trying to kind of harness in that very innocent, like non-threatening personality that Norman Bates is. And honestly, I'll go out on a limb and say that I think that Anthony Perkins gives his best performance as Norman Bates in Psycho 2.
No, Mother. Mary's still here with me. I like her. No. No, of course not. Not as much as you. No, I won't do that. You can't make me kill her.
You really believe that this guy is healed. You really believe that Mother is gone. You believe that this guy wants to move on, that he wants to hold on to that innocence that he once had and expel everything else and be a productive member of society and be a friendly person and be that character that you believed Norman Bates to be when you first got introduced to him in that original film. And he does a great job at doing that. There's so many times in this film where you actually root for Norman Bates to not be drawn back in by Mother. You're like, no, let him live his damn life, woman. And then whenever you do get the darker side of Norman where things start to feel like maybe he is transitioning back into Mother, maybe he already has, maybe some of these deaths that are sprinkling up here and there around this motel actually are him, and we're not gonna find out until the final reel again that he's been psycho all along and maybe he played his way out of this psychiatric hospital. The movie does a great job at kind of keeping you guessing at what form of Norman Bates you are watching. And Anthony Perkins nails every aspect of the entire circle of that character as well as Mother. I even like how the movie focuses on how everybody surrounding Norman accepts or rejects Norman and what he is today. Like you get the townsfolk, you get the people that work at the diner, you get people that just kind of trickled into town that maybe just now heard the story of Norman Bates in the Bates Motel and then they see him right there in the flesh, the sheriff, Toomey, all these different characters that know full on well what happened, that know the legacy of Norman Bates and how they respond to that, whether they choose to believe in him being healed, whether they choose to believe that he will never be healed, even all the way down to Lila Crane, who is kind of your antagonist in this film after a certain point where she's so hell-bent on revenge for what happened to her sister Marion in the previous film that she's hell-bent on getting him back into the psychiatric hospital, even if she has to get him there herself.
You really want to know what Norman's like?
Yeah.
Better than you'll ever be, fat boy.
Which brings us into the twists and the turns of this movie, which I do think they pull off pretty well. I like the fact that you have Lila Crane, who is now placed in this position where she is trying to bring Mother back in any way she can. She's trying to mentally torment Norman. She's trying to chip away at that wall that he has built between him and Mother in hopes that he will lose his mind, possibly kill somebody, and then end up back in the insane asylum. That is her ultimate goal. And a lot of people have heard, like, over the couple of years that I've been, since I've seen this film and I've discussed it in the horror community, that some people don't really care for the way that they've transitioned her character from this heroine to a degree in the second half of the original Psycho into this hell-bent, almost villain in this film, but I actually think it's a nice little transition. To me, it makes sense. To me, I'm very easily going along on the believability of that little transition of that character with how extreme this story was and how suddenly she lost her sister to this violent crime and this psychopath, and then eventually married her sister's lover, and God knows that was probably a strained relationship, and then had a kid, and you start to put together these pieces for how this woman's life probably was, and over time, everything that went wrong, she probably traced back to that Bates Motel, traced back to Norman Bates meeting her sister, and ultimately blames him for everything in her life and just wants whatever she feels is revenge against Norman. And also keeping with the twists and the turns, as well as talking about how characters respond to him, I really like the character of Mary, played by Meg Tilly.
Hi.
Hi.
Is that operator room with you still open?
Oh, sure.
Great.
Well, what happened?
Oh. You know my girlfriend, the one I told you about?
Yeah.
Well, her boyfriend sleeps over almost every night. Do you know what it's like trying to sleep in a one-room apartment when a couple's making love 5 feet from you?
Noisy?
You're not kidding.
You don't see her a whole lot. She certainly didn't kind of blow up, in a sense, the way that her sister Jennifer did, but she does have a few key roles, especially in the 80s, where this is one of them where you go back and you remember and you're like, man, I wish I could have seen more out of Meg Tilly, because I actually think she portrays this character very well. A little known fact, they actually tried to get Jamie Lee Curtis to fill in this role as kind of like a tribute to her mother being in the first film, but probably due to scheduling conflicts or something, I'm not exactly sure why. She ended up passing on it and we got Meg Tilly. That would have been interesting, but Meg Tilly does hold her own, and she does complement Anthony Perkins and his performance very well, and I think they actually have really good chemistry, because there's pieces in the movie where I struggle to believe, and I will get into this, how far she will go for Norman, but they have such a connection on like this mother relationship where Meg Tilly's character Mary is basically being forced for God knows how many years to play into her mother's agenda against Norman, and, you know, placing her right into the devil's hands, if you will, and making her go and play this role inside of Norman's life, right there in the danger. And then you have Norman with everything that went on with his mother, and his mother quite literally making him do evil things. And I feel like that connection makes sense when you watch these two characters. Despite the little bit of a logic gap that I'll get into, I think that kind of torment that they both have for their own mother's agendas kind of brings them together in a sense, to where Mary wants to believe Norman, and past a certain point in the film, she's going to do whatever she can to ruin her mother's agenda. And I think that plays out well.
He's about to go over the edge, isn't he? Listen. Now listen, just dress up in his mother's clothes one more time. That's all it's going to take. I'll have the police and a doctor out there before you're in any danger. Then they'll have to act on our petition.
Mother, I signed all your petitions. I've been to all your meetings. I've done everything you've asked me for years, but I am not going to hurt Norman anymore.
Well, if you won't do it for me, at least do it for your father.
I'm not living for dead people anymore, Mother. Not for your sister, my father, not even for you. Now, I'm going.
Now, wait a minute.
And even the final little twist, surprise, reveal where you have Mrs. Spool, the woman who got him the job at the diner, who you only see in a few scenes in the film, turning out to be the killer all along, turning out to be the one calling him and saying, hey, it's me, I'm your real mother, I'm the one, not Norma, and then showing up at the end to fully embrace Norman now that everybody's out of his way and everything has, from what she can tell, been settled and everything is back to normal. But then we quickly find out that nothing is normal to Norman until he has a rotting corpse up in the window upstairs in a rocking chair, and whack, Mrs. Spool is done.
You're sure you won't have a sandwich?
Pardon?
It's comedic enough to be enjoyable in that sense. It's dark and twisted enough to be enjoyable in that sense. And it totally just kind of resets the stage for where this series will go post Psycho 2, and especially in that great scene where it's all silhouette and he just walks out and he's standing outside of his house right in front of the motel, looks up and sees Mother once again sitting in the window looking down upon her son. Just a great, crazy, sadistic, fucked up way to end this movie that is perfect. being that we got Dean Cundey, you gotta talk about the cinematography, the shots, the way that he shoots the house. I love that house, and you get to spend a lot more time in the house. You get to see a lot more of the house in this film. And I feel like Dean Cundey, the way that he shoots, the way that he frames certain shots, somewhat paying homage and somewhat mimicking some aesthetics from that first film, but not outright copying them in any way, and definitely making them a little fresher and a little bit more modern. I think that all works to make this feel like a sequel that does spiritually fit very well with that original film. And last but definitely not least, we gotta talk about the carnage candy in Psycho 2. Psycho, being that it was in the 1960s, it was very violent for the time. You watch it nowadays, it's a little bit tame because you know, the cameras kind of cut around the kills. You don't really get to see blood. Even the little bit of blood in the shower was chocolate syrup, and you know, you see the age of that era when you watch that film. When you get to Psycho 2, they made the smart choice, in my opinion, at ramping up the gore a little bit, and certainly putting some kills in this movie, especially Lila Crane's death, the knife through the face, that is memorable, and it sticks out amongst the 80s slasher genre. The thousands and thousands of kills that happened in that 10-year span, and this movie gives you a couple of them that stands out and are memorable, and I'll go on a limb and say probably are the most memorable kills in the entire franchise. Now for the mixed aspects, I really only have one, and that's the score. I think the score works well when they do utilize it in this film, but when you're following up Psycho, and Psycho has such an iconic, memorable score, it feels like a little bit of a shame that they didn't work that score into this movie more. They do in the beginning when they're kind of recapping the shower scene, but it feels like there were spots in Psycho 2 where they could have utilized that original score a couple of times to make that connective tissue between the two films even stronger. And when you have an iconic score like that, if you're not gonna use it, you better have something that's as memorable or close to it, and I don't feel like it is. It works well for the movie, it's not like a standout, it's not like something that's a negative outright, which is why it's in mixed, but when you see how great the score is in the 1960s Psycho, and then you transition to this, feels like that's the one thing that they almost purposely dropped the ball on just a little bit. And now for my negatives, which I really only have one, but it's a pretty decent sized negative. And that's just some logic gaps that I have with this film. You know, once in a while you guys hear me say that about logic gaps. I get a lot of pushback sometimes when you're watching a movie about a guy with a split personality that murders people, you know, is logic really there? And this movie is so grounded that, like I often say with the films that I've used it before, if a movie is grounded and it's going for that sense of reality, you do need to have a more attention to detail, to logic, than films like perhaps Friday the 13th do. So you watch Psycho 2, and you watch this setup, and you see these characters and how they're kind of weaving throughout the plot, and especially how they're trying to set up misdirection and kind of keep you guessing on what the twists are gonna be. There are some things about the storyline that do bug me slightly with the logic. One of them is the fact that they released Norman back to this hotel and back to this house with no supervision whatsoever. The guy murdered, well, I think they said 7 people in this beginning of this film at this motel. This was his killing ground, if you will. This is the scene of the crime. If anywhere on earth is going to set this guy off again, it's going to be this motel and this house. And they even have the doctor who drops him off in the first act of the film even notate this. He's like, you know, you could go somewhere else. If anything's gonna set you off again, it's this house. And he goes, yeah, fuck it, I'm just gonna hang out here though. And the doctor's like, okay, cool. And they move on with that. And to me, that is a logic gap where you have such a prominent figure of horror in this town. And you have a very tight-knit group of law enforcement, and obviously a doctor that cares enough about the case to constantly drop in on Norman. It just feels weird that they would even allow him to go back to there. But I understand you have to get past that to get this story in place, but I feel like there could have been an extra little bit of storytelling in there to make that slightly more believable for me. Beyond that, which is the more of an issue that I have, because I get that that one is just something you're gonna have to accept to get the movie rolling. The one that I have more of an issue with has to do with Mary and Lila and their plan towards Norman. So Lila believes that Norman is going to kill again. She believes that he's still a psycho and he's either playing to get out again, or the state is just that ignorant that they're going to let him back out again. She has the petition and everything. It's one of the first scenes of the film where she's pleading not to let this guy back out again. So she believes he's a danger, and he will be a danger, and he will kill again. And yet she places her daughter, the only person left in this world that she loves since her husband's apparently dead, and obviously her sister is dead, right in the hands of the devil. Lets her stay in the same house as Norman. And then you go even further with that with Mary and how far she takes it, like putting a knife in Norman's hand, taking a shower when she knows that's how her aunt was murdered, with no defense around whatsoever. Like there's certain spots in this where after you find out the twist that she knows full on what Norman is, who Norman is, and she's planning to make him go psycho again, that you kind of look at Meg Tilly's character and you go, you really live life on the edge, don't you?
Oh, there. Something wrong, Norman?
It just begins to feel like the story and the screenplay have to cheat a little bit to make the reveals make more sense, or to make those reveals happen. But it kind of leaves gaps in the previous sections of the film once you find these things out, and you kind of, when you start thinking about it, you're like, I don't know if that 100% came together perfectly or not. I still like it. It's not a big deal to me. I don't watch it and I go, oh, this part again. But it does stand out to me as something where there might have been a little gap in the writing there that could have been tightened up slightly to make that more logical. Even down to the whole twist with Mrs. Spool. Now, I enjoy it. I think it's hilarious for the way that they play it out, and it's not a big prominent piece of the film. It's just like one little final nugget of twist. But even that section, the fact that Norman's mother, the one that he's obsessed with, the one that has psychologically traumatized him so much that he has become her, was never his mother in the first place, that's a twist that's kind of a hard pill to swallow a little bit. I understand where they're going for and I enjoy it, and we're gonna get into it with my Psycho 3 review. It's something that they eventually just retcon anyway, so it doesn't even really stay part of the story. But when you stop to think about it beyond just the grimy, little bit of sick, dark humor that you have in the last 5 minutes of the film to make that twist happen, it does start to kind of pull the strings a little bit on the integrity of the story, and you're like, okay, so there's two mothers now. All right, I can dig it. I don't know about that, but I can dig it. It's pretty funny. And like I said, guys, this whole section of negatives, they're pretty minuscule in the grand scheme of things. I think this movie is a damn good sequel. It's a damn good slasher film. So this is just things that I have to be honest and admit when I watch it, it stands out to me slightly, and it's something where I'm like, but it doesn't ruin the experience for me. It's not anything where I'm like, damn, they really dropped the ball on that. This could have been perfect. It's just little things. I understand script writing is a very difficult thing to do. God knows I don't have a successful script out there making a movie, so who the fuck am I to say it? But there are some things to make the twists happen that just don't come together as nicely as they did in the first film, where everything was kept very simple, no convoluted storytelling whatsoever, and the twist made sense immediately. You get to this, slightly less of a good execution. But overall, guys, I think Psycho 2 is one hell of a sequel. It is one of the most underrated slasher sequels that I have ever seen. It's one where you think about how classic and how beloved and celebrated that original film is, and thinking that there's sequels out there, you almost walk into it expecting it to be bad, because so many of them have been. But Psycho 2 really stands out in the pack at matching the integrity of that original film and going in a different direction and really feeling like a counterpart to that original story that merits its own existence. And that's more than I can say for, what, 90% of the sequels out there, especially in the slasher genre? Bravo, Psycho 2. So if you're a fan of the original film, you want to see more with this character, but you are maybe a little timid on the quality of the sequels, you will be pleasantly surprised with how good Psycho 2 is. Expect maybe a little bit of logic issues, expect not quite of an iconic story to be told, but it's definitely a movie that plays into the character of Norman Bates in some fascinating ways, is very entertaining, ups the gore a bit, and merits its own existence alongside that original film. So check this thing out, go out, and buy it. So what do you guys think of Psycho 2? Do you love this sequel? Do you hate this sequel? Do you prefer Psycho 2 to the original? Do you see some of those logic gaps that I see, or do you think that it's actually not that big of a deal and it makes sense to you? Let me know down below. And what is your favorite kill in the Psycho franchise? I know I haven't got to 3 and 4 in the remake yet, but the kills in this are awesome. So is that your favorite? Let me know down below. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button. If you guys want to check out some social media links, look down below in the video description for Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Also my Patreon page, which is a great way to give back to this channel, help this channel grow, and get cool exclusive content for your eyes only if you decide to become a patron. And if you check right below the video description, that is also my Teespring shelf, which has all of my merchandise, all of the designs designed by the great Woody Bowen. Check all of that out. There is a ton of stuff down there, guys. T-shirts, bags, stickers, everything that your little heart desires, and some very cool designs. So please check all that out. And if you want to check out some more of my videos, including my review for the 1960 original, you can check those out by clicking right over here.